Welcome to Canto 31. I am Gina Saki. I'm retired from the Department of Romance Languages at the University of Oregon. I am delighted to be here with Mary Jo Bang, who will introduce herself.
And I'm Mary Jo Bang. I'm a poet. I'm the author of 8 books of poetry and also a translation of Dante's Inferno, which came out in 2012. And now I've completed the translation of Purgatorio, which will come out on July 13th of this year. I teach creative writing at Washington University in St. Louis. And I'm also delighted to be here with Gina.
This is so exciting, Mary Jo. You are one of a handful of female poets, translators to take on the comedy. And there is so much to say about your translation. I'm going to have to try to remember to talk more about Dante than about your translation. It is so engaging and so involving, so energetic. It crackles with energy. I want to just start off our conversation asking you why you proposed that you and I talk about Canto 31 in particular.
Well, I think it's because I was so shocked to meet Beatrice. Now, we meet her in the previous canto, but it's her behavior in Canto 31 that is so arresting to me. And nothing has prepared me for that. You know, in Inferno, we only meet her via Virgil's explanation of how he comes to be at the edge of the forest and prepared to take Dante through hell. And he reports the conversation he had with her when she came down to Limbo. And of course, she comes down in tears. And so she appears to me as the classic damsel in distress, even though the distress is Dante's plight, not necessarily, her own, because as she says, nothing can hurt me. I'm up in heaven. And the only times after that we encounter her is when Virgil mentions her as this kind of carrot, in order to prod Dante to keep going on. When he's tired and wants to slow the pace or sit down, he'll say, remember, Beatrice is waiting for us. And, you don't want to delay. And so we get this idea of her not through her actions, but that she's the object of Dante's love. And even if you go outside of Inferno and look at the commentary, you learn very little about her. And even the descriptors that Dante uses to say what she was like, she was honest, onata, she was gentilla, which is that expansive adjective that can mean nice, kind, graceful, etc. So there's nothing about her that prepared me for this woman.
Our last glimpse of her, of Virgil's glimpses of her, was him saying, in the terrace of lust, I seem to see her eyes beyond this wall of fire. Yes. So once again, that expectation of a love object has been reinforced just before it's going to be exploded. Well, she remains a love object, but not a standard or classic one.
Well, and Dante is clearly relying on her to rescue him and to embrace him and to somehow, I think that finally he will have her as a lover, not in any physical sense, obviously, because she's dead, but that this will be the culmination of all the longing that has gone on, as he tells us elsewhere, since he was 9 years old. And of course, she doesn't do that. And she's this great, a strong woman who makes demands on him that he's totally unprepared for, I feel like.
She levels him, she flattens him.
Yeah.
Just when he might be expecting some, I feel the signs, I see the signs of the ancient flame. She stomps on him. And it is the connection. Obviously, we're talking about the fact that 30 and 31 are bookend cantos. They're the same scene, and they need to be read together. But when we get to Canto 31, you have clearly an investment in this particular moment where she is, as the word you chose, magisterial, not affectionate, not tender, not relieved, not pleased, not proud, not femininely adorable, but stern.
And I think that's what actually becomes her beauty at the end of the canto, where, and we'll talk about that later, how the canto ends, but that kind of breathtaking beauty is not something physical, not something trivial, not anything that we usually associate with a beautiful woman. It's that she is so smart, and that she is so self-aware, and that she is so aware of all the nuances of human behavior, and particularly his human behavior. And that makes her, I was thinking the other day that it's like what Keats, of course, calls truth and beauty, but it's knowledge and beauty. And of course, knowledge is truth. And so for Dante, that moment of this is all you know, and this is all you need to know, she becomes something else. She's transformed. And of course, that idea of transformation is the essence of Christianity, where Christ is transformed into the divine. And he appreciates, I think, the divinity of this kind of person, this kind of woman.
And as she is staring at the griffin, and the pilgrim staring into her eyes, she is his conduit for a kind of understanding that he would not gain just looking at the griffin, which does not appear to change, but she sees the dual nature of this symbolic creature in the eyes of Beatrice. So I'll put a bookmark on that to come back to it later. But this canto is so central in the Earthly Paradise cantos, where the poet has already warned us that he is really upping the ante, because this is our transition to the celestial paradise. So what we've become accustomed to in terms of the lessons of Purgatorio is completely not set aside, but transcended in this several handful of cantos, with the books of the Bible and the griffin and the chariot and everything that we see being staged in such an overtly allegorical fashion in the Earthly Paradise. We are to understand that although Virgil has told us the pilgrim can no longer err in the Earthly Paradise, he was wrong. And the pilgrim has to set aside some of his confidence that Virgil was enough or right to get him to this point. As soon as he gets here, he messes up and is sternly rebuked and forced to undergo another very ceremonial moment of contrition and confession, contrition, satisfaction, before we get to the end of the canto, where a lot of what's going on there is going to be dominant in Paradiso. And we'll come back to that too. So,
and I think that idea of contrition is also something, I mean, the whole Purgatorio, we keep meeting these people who are undergoing penitence and they are contrite, but watching Dante, our protagonist, undergo it and the nuance with which he describes the defensiveness. He first sees her as if she's this admiral overseeing the fleet, and then he sees her as a mother on her high horse, and he keeps kind of protecting himself. And it's only when you leave all of that behind, when you let go of that, that you really do begin to own your own shame and your own shortcomings. And that is what contrition is. And maybe that's why it takes so long to go up the mountain of purgatory, because that takes a long time to achieve. Compare that to the hollow sorries that we get from politicians.
I'm sorry if anyone felt offended.
Exactly. And I sincerely am sorry, but you haven't gone through this kind of psychological process. And I think that that's why I love Dante is, pre-Freudian, he seems to understand the way people think and the way the feelings began to be entwined with the way we think and how our defenses work. And this moment of the defenses falling, usually, that takes years of psychotherapy. And she's done it in a flash, as it were. But it hasn't been easy. He's gone through, it's almost like a speeded up version, a time-lapse photography of all the years that it takes to reach these realizations.
Well, and he gave us excellent training in the Inferno in all the defensive, evasive strategies that people can devise to make their own behavior seem not just not blameworthy, but actually admirable if you look at it from their point of view. All of those dodges fell away in Purgatorio for the other souls. Not for Dante yet, not for the pilgrim. And you're right that it's when he gets to this place that he utterly dissolves into this moment of weeping and repenting. I particularly love, I could spend the whole time talking about lines of yours that I particularly love, but in line 40, you're the only translator currently on my shelf who uses the lines about the sinner's cheek and interprets that as tears, which is clearly what's being described in the scene that we're looking at. The weeping is there, but the translators almost all seem to head in the direction of the mouth, the throat, the lips. In other words, the words.
Blushing. Blushing is the other thing.
Blushing, yes.
Yeah.
I have to read that in Italian, and then I'll just read your tercet, because even though it will embarrass you, it's relevant to how fresh you make this scene. Ma quando scoppia dalla propria gota l'accusa del peccato, in nostra corte rivolge sé contro il taglio, la rota. Mandelbaum says, when this charge of sinfulness has burst from one's own cheek, in other words, self-accusation. But what you say, I think, is absolutely spot on. In our court, when an accusation of guilt spills out onto the sinner's cheek, he can address the rostrum and deflect the cutting edge. So you keep that a beautiful reference to the sharp edge and the sharp point of the sword, but without using the word tears, you imply it, and it's really it's beautifully done. So putting a parenthesis around that moment of confession and contrition, Beatrice's roles here are indeed multifarious. You mentioned the maternal, and I just want to point out how you translate answer me, rispondi a me, is answer me. And some translators choose quite pallid ways of saying that. Speak or reply to me. And realistically, all of us who have had a mother have had someone stare them in the eye and say, answer me.
Yeah.
She is, maternal here as in many other places. She's juridical. She's confessional. She is martial and military. But she is also amorous and erotic in the sense of, I was more beautiful than anything in the world, and you still blew it.
And what's interesting is when he begins, I think, to return to that erotic connection, the angels say, way too fixed, because they see him staring at her and they know how to read that particular stare. And so he really has to break himself from that. And I feel that the Matilda figure foreshadows that kind of necessity, where he comes across her first, I think in Canto 28, and he sees her alone in a meadow. And
gathering flowers and singing.
Just like Persephone. And he says, hey, come over here so I can hear what you're singing. I mean, it's a traditional pickup line. And she does come and she says, okay, I'm here now. So what do you want? And, she is not going to play that game. And she says, I can see, I totally understand why you might misunderstand the situation, because I'm smiling and we're in this place that is the nest for human nature. So, your mind's going to go there, but believe me, that's not what we're about here. And you have to have a different relationship to women. And of course, then she calls him her brother, using the term for a monk or a religious brother, as a way to emphasize both the equality and the kind of new relationship, that it's through a theological relationship and not a romantic relationship.
And she will be immersing him in this river of Lethe. So the pilgrim has to learn how to recode the physical beauty of Beatrice, which Beatrice articulates herself when she says, mai non t'appresentò natura o arte piacer quanto le belle membra in ch'io rinchiusa fui e che so in terra sparte. And you translate, neither nature nor art ever offered you anything as delightful as the beautiful flesh I was held in, and which is now buried in the ground. So she says, and you still refused to see the message in that beauty and went following after other novelties. But he has to learn how to re-understand that that particular poetic register and that particular physical, corporeal beauty, which were the knots that would hold him fast.
And she does this brilliant thing. This is one of my favorite moments, where line 64, he's describing, after she's quit speaking, like children stand listening, shamefaced, speechless, eyes glued to the ground, owning up to what they've done, overcome by remorse. I stood there. She said, since mere listening has made you sad, lift up your beard and have a good look at some serious labor pains. And then he goes on to say that like a sturdy oak is uprooted with less resistance by one of our northern winds or by one from the land of Iarbas, then my reluctant chin rose at her command. By her saying beard and meaning face, I felt all the venom behind the pretext. And that whole idea of be a man that is coded in, lift up your beard. And the sarcasm behind that. She just seems like a woman of our time. And it has taken women a long time to achieve, I think, the ability to speak and to insist on the right to speak. And I think that's what attracted me to her. And as I said before, I wasn't prepared to meet this woman, this medieval woman, who we always think of piety and demureness. And it made me wonder what kind of women that Dante had met in his travels.
Well, he has traded in the poetry that made of women bearers, not makers of meaning. And Beatrice takes the megaphone, the microphone, the zoomophone, and is the maker, not just the bearer of meaning. At least that is his pretext. Obviously, he is choreographing this entire thing. But it is Beatrice who is his conduit in the Paradiso. And the last lines of the canto, as I see we're coming to the end of our time, lay out a series of tropes that are going to really permeate Paradiso. The pilgrim staring into Beatrice's eyes in Paradiso will be the mechanism that power his ascent through the material spheres and enable his ultimate vision of God. As she looks at the griffin and he in her eyes sees its double nature, he doesn't see it just staring straight at the griffin. The food that simultaneously appeases hunger and generates hunger, that's very perfectly encapsulates what happens in Paradiso. And finally, of course, the ineffability topos that we are going to encounter every half canto in Paradiso. I barely remember, not well enough to record it, in line 99, and that's your translation. And the very end of the canto, and I think you can just read 6 lines, and then your translation, where the voice of the poet is speaking to the voice to Beatrice's smile, not to her, but to her smile. O splendor di viva luce eterna, che pallido si fece sotto l'ombra sì di Parnaso, o beve in sua cisterna, che non paresse aver la mente ingombra, tentando a render te qual tu paresti là dove armonizzando il ciel t'adombra, quando nell'aere aperto ti solvesti. So how about if you read that in your translation?
O splendor of everlasting living light, who, among those who grew pale beneath the shadows of Parnassus or drank from its fountains, wouldn't have been driven to distraction, trying to convey what you appeared to be, matching the heaven, casting a shadow over you, when there, in the open air, you showed yourself. Yeah.
That is really, really beautiful. Beautiful solutions, internal rhymes. And I think we have to conclude and say goodbye for now, but I have loved reading your translation, and I am going to be talking about it for a good long time. And I look forward to having the hard copy in my hands to read over and over. Thank you.
Well, and I think that we have to remember these are Dante's words, and that in fact he's the poet. I'm really only the translator, but he's amazing. And
it's always best when the translator is a poet.
Well, I think in this case it is, because I think that knowledge of what he's trying to do in terms of make a visual image is that thing that has to carry the translation here. You have to see that she's breathtaking, literally. And how do you say that? And he's managed to do it. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mary Jo,
for letting me talk about Beatrice. And
thank you for letting me talk about your translation.
Thank you so much.
Stay well, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.